You might think politics is all about the loud speeches, the debates, or the laws that get passed. But what if I told you that the real power lies in something much less obvious? It's the systems behind the scenes. These systems are like hidden gears that shape everything from elections to the economy, and they affect your life in ways you don't even realize. For example, did you know that the top 1% of Americans own 40% of the country's wealth? Or that in some countries, a single decision by the government can determine the fate of millions? These aren't just coincidences, these are the results of deeply ingrained systems. In this video, we're going to break down why these systems matter more than you think. We'll explore how they silently control the political world, how even the best-intentioned leaders get trapped by them, and how they shape the outcomes of everything we care about, whether we notice or not. Prepare to see politics in a whole new light, as we pull back the curtain and reveal how the real power plays out. You won't look at politics the same way again. Chapter 1: The Silent Architects, How Systems Shape Political Reality. Have you ever wondered who really pulls the strings in politics? It's not just the politicians or the laws, it's the systems. Political systems are like invisible hands, guiding decisions and actions in ways most people don't notice. These systems are the underlying frameworks that dictate how power is distributed and exercised. Think about the US electoral system. It's not just about voting. It's the Electoral College that determines the outcome. In 2000, Al Gore won the popular vote but lost the presidency because of this system. It's a reminder of how systems can shape results in unexpected ways. Another example? The role of lobbyists in shaping laws. According to Open Secrets, in 2020 alone, lobbyists spent over $3.5 billion influencing legislation. Behind every piece of legislation is a system that rewards certain interests while neglecting others. These systems often work to keep the status quo in place. There's also the judicial system, often portrayed as neutral. But research has shown that judges' decisions can be influenced by their political leanings and the systems they work in. The political system doesn't just shape laws, it shapes how those laws are interpreted and enforced. In fact, many world leaders aren't just responding to public demand, they're acting within tightly controlled systems. Think of the European Union, a complex web of treaties and regulations. While leaders may seem to be in control, they're often constrained by the systems of governance that limit their freedom of action. Understanding these systems gives us the tools to analyze political events more critically. We stop viewing politics as random decisions made by individuals and begin to see it as a chess game played on a board designed to favor certain players. Chapter 2: The Systems Trap, How Good Intentions Are Stuck in Bad Frameworks. A system isn't just a set of rules, it's a set of constraints. Even the most well-meaning politicians can find themselves trapped in a system that doesn't work. Take, for instance, the war on drugs. Initially, it was meant to tackle addiction and crime. But the system of mandatory minimum sentences, aggressive policing, and mass incarceration turned it into a cycle of inequality and failed reform. Look at the state of healthcare in the US. Many politicians have pushed for reforms to expand access to care, but the system of private insurance and profit-driven hospitals often limits the reach of those efforts. While individual reformers may have good intentions, they're often working within a system that rewards inefficiency over progress. This is where systems theory comes in. A system can appear functional on the surface, but its inner workings may be deeply flawed. One example is the US Senate filibuster. Designed to ensure debate, it now often allows a minority of lawmakers to block legislation, frustrating attempts at progress. When people try to change these systems, they're often met with resistance not from bad people, but from the system itself. In fact, systems are designed to be resistant to change. Sociologist Robert K. Merton once said, "A system has a way of perpetuating itself, even when it's no longer effective or fair." Data backs this up. Research shows that institutions, even in times of crisis, tend to stick to existing processes. A 2019 study found that only 30% of reforms in the public sector lead to significant change. The rest are small, incremental adjustments that don't tackle the root cause of problems. What this reveals is that systems often fight against good intentions, not because they're inherently bad, but because they're rigid. Even reformers find themselves navigating a maze of rules that limit their potential. Chapter 3: Democracy's Dilemma, The Double-Edged Sword of Bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is both the backbone and the Achilles heel of democratic governance. On one hand, it ensures that laws are implemented efficiently and consistently. On the other, it often becomes bogged down in red tape, creating inefficiency and frustration. Take the US government shutdowns. Every time the government can't pass a budget, it's a reminder of how bureaucratic systems can halt progress. One of the most ironic things about democracy is that, in order to function, it needs a lot of bureaucracy. Think about voting. To ensure fairness, there are thousands of local voting districts, countless poll workers, and strict rules. But when these systems are flawed, like when voter ID laws disenfranchise minority groups, bureaucracy becomes an obstacle to democracy. Let's look at a real-world example: Japan. It's often seen as a model of efficiency, but even there, bureaucracy can be a problem. A 2018 report revealed that Japan's civil service is so rigid that innovation in government services is often stifled by its complex regulations. The system was designed to be efficient but ended up being a barrier to progress. A huge part of the issue is that bureaucratic systems prioritize rules over outcomes. This makes them stable but often slow to adapt. According to a 2015 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research, the more bureaucratic a system, the harder it is for that system to pivot in times of crisis. Governments with too many layers of administration struggle to respond to new challenges. However, bureaucracy isn't always a bad thing. For example, after Hurricane Katrina, FEMA's slow response was attributed to the lack of clear systems in place. A more structured, less bureaucratic response might have saved lives. But it's a delicate balance. Bureaucracy must be robust enough to be effective but flexible enough to adapt to unexpected situations. The question we face is, how do we balance democracy with efficiency? How do we create systems that empower citizens without suffocating them in unnecessary rules? There's no easy answer, but one thing is clear: our political systems are often trapped in an endless cycle of rules that undermine their original purpose. By understanding these systems, how they work, and how they sometimes fail, we can start to think more critically about what needs to change. Bureaucracy might be necessary, but it can't become the enemy of progress. If you're finding this video eye-opening, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more insights like these. Chapter 4: Revolution or Evolution: How Systems Adapt, or Fail to. Political systems, whether they're democratic, authoritarian, or something in between, don't just stay the same. They either evolve over time or, in some cases, collapse altogether. The tricky part? Political systems can be incredibly resistant to change, and sometimes even the smallest tweaks can cause massive shifts. Take the fall of the Soviet Union, for example. A massive empire that once spanned across several continents failed because its political system was so rigid, it couldn't adapt to changing economic and political realities. But not all systems crumble. Some evolve quietly and incrementally. In the UK, for example, the gradual shift toward universal suffrage over the past century has reshaped its political system without a major revolution. The Reform ACTs of 1832, 1867, and 1884 slowly expanded voting rights, transforming a small group of elite voters into a broader, more inclusive electorate. This kind of evolution is often messy and slow, but it shows that systems can change in a way that avoids chaos. Systems like the US political structure show how incremental evolution works. Over time, despite crises like the Civil War or the Great Depression, the US political system adapted, sometimes through formal changes like constitutional amendments, other times through informal changes like shifts in public opinion. The key? Flexibility. While these systems are designed to be stable, they also leave room for change when necessary. Yet, not all systems are good at adapting. The French Revolution of 1789, for example, was sparked in part by the inability of the monarchy to adapt to rising economic pressures. When systems fail to evolve, they face huge risks. But change can also backfire, as seen in the collapse of the Weimar Republic in Germany. The rapid changes in policy, combined with economic instability, created a fertile ground for the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. A fascinating aspect of these changes is how political systems can sometimes appear stable, even while they're starting to crack. In fact, according to a study by the International Political Science Association, political systems that seem least likely to collapse, such as long-standing democracies, are often the ones most at risk when they stop evolving. The study found that 60% of democratic systems that experienced major crises in the last century had failed to adapt adequately to economic and social changes. Change isn't always a revolution, sometimes it's a shift so subtle you don't even notice it happening. The trick is understanding when a system is evolving and when it's just crumbling. Chapter 5: The Hidden Hand: How Economic Systems Dictate Political Power. In the world of politics, it's often said that money is power. But what if the real power lies in the economic systems that shape the way money flows and the way policies are created? Economic systems like capitalism, socialism, or mixed economies don't just determine who gets rich, they shape how political power is distributed across a society. Take capitalism, for example. In capitalist societies, wealth often translates directly into power. Political donations, corporate lobbying, and even media ownership can shift public policy in ways that favor the wealthy. A 2020 study by Princeton University concluded that the US government largely responds to the preferences of the wealthiest 10% of the population, rather than the majority of voters. This highlights how economic systems create power dynamics that influence politics in subtle but profound ways. Even in systems that aren't strictly capitalist, the economy plays a central role. In countries like China, where the state controls much of the economy, political power is tightly intertwined with economic control. The Chinese Communist Party's grip on power is strengthened by its control over major industries and financial institutions. This makes it far more difficult for political opponents to rise because they lack access to the economic levers of power. Similarly, in socialist systems, where wealth is supposed to be distributed more equally, the state often holds most of the political power. In these systems, the economy is controlled by the government, and political leaders often make decisions about what industries thrive and who gets access to wealth. While these systems promise equality, they can create their own form of inequality, as political leaders control the economy and distribute resources based on loyalty and favor. Understanding how economic systems shape politics also helps explain the rise of populist movements in recent years. These movements often tap into the frustrations of ordinary people who feel excluded from the economic benefits of capitalism. They promise to break the hold of elites and redistribute power and wealth, but they must confront the deep economic systems that have long concentrated wealth in the hands of the few. In fact, studies show that inequality can destabilize political systems. The International Monetary Fund found that countries with higher levels of income inequality tend to have lower levels of political stability. This may explain why countries like Brazil and Argentina, with their high inequality, have experienced repeated political unrest in recent decades. At the heart of all this is a simple truth: economic systems aren't just about wealth, they're about power. The way a society distributes its resources determines who holds political influence. If you want to understand political power, look closely at the economy. Chapter 6: A New System for the Digital Age. How Tech is Redefining Power. The digital revolution is transforming politics in ways we never imagined. Today, technology doesn't just enable political movements, it's reshaping the very nature of power itself. Social media, data analytics, and algorithms have become central players in modern politics. Think about it. In 2016, data firm Cambridge Analytica played a major role in influencing the US presidential election by targeting voters with highly tailored ads. This is the new system of political power. For the first time in history, political campaigns can use data to micro-target voters with unprecedented precision. Data has become as valuable as money in shaping elections. Campaigns can track everything about voters, from their political views to their buying habits, and use that information to influence how they vote. In fact, the global market for political data analytics is expected to exceed $9 billion by 2026, showing just how big of an impact technology is having on political power. Social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube have become the battlegrounds for modern political discourse. They can sway public opinion, create echo chambers, and spread misinformation. A 2018 study showed that fake news spreads 6 times faster than real news on Twitter, which raises questions about the integrity of our democratic systems in the digital age. But technology's impact doesn't stop at elections. In countries with authoritarian governments, technology is used to maintain control. China's use of facial recognition software and internet censorship is a powerful reminder of how digital systems can be used to consolidate power and limit dissent. These systems allow governments to monitor and control their populations with a level of precision never seen before. Yet, the digital age also has the potential to empower ordinary citizens. The rise of online activism, from the Arab Spring to the Black Lives Matter movement, shows how technology can be used to challenge the status quo. Social media has given a voice to people who were once marginalized, making it easier to organize protests, spread ideas, and demand change. The challenge is that technology is double-edged. While it can create more inclusive and transparent political systems, it can also enable new forms of control. The question we need to ask is, how do we make sure that technology serves democracy and not the other way around? One thing is clear: in the digital age, power is no longer just about physical territory or military strength. It's about control over information and data. Those who control these digital systems wield enormous political power. As we move further into the 21st century, understanding how these digital systems work will be critical for understanding global politics. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the hidden forces shaping the world around us.